members of my family and things like that, and kind of be like, oh, there's, remind yourself there's more to life than your job.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So true.
On a final note, I wanted to get to this. After so many weeks of lockdown, many New Zealanders have discovered the allure of elasticated waistbands. And why not? Stretchy pants are accommodating and usually made from a soft, forgiving fabric, perfect for slouching around at home or perhaps even in the office. Does anyone wear jeans anymore, and why would we want to? The Guardian recently put the question to its readers, will we ever give up our comfortable clothes? Eli Matthewson, the elasticated waistband. Are you a big fan?
I'm wearing elasticated shorts even right now. So yeah, I'd say I'm a fan. Even during lockdown, I had to push myself really to put some jeans on for dinner, dress up to make that feel a little bit more special. And it's great news. Now we can, a lot of my job, I'm working from home 3 of the 5 days now, and it's a dream. I'm loving it.
It's just so rigid, Livia, when you put your jeans back on after having your track pants on for so long, or your elasticated waistbands, maybe pajamas, and you put your jeans on and no give.
Yeah, that's so true. In fact, you're talking about pajama pants. I was at a global conference for 4 days recently, and it was overnight because it was being hosted out of Vienna. And I was literally in pajama pants for those 4 or 5 days and didn't get out of them. And that was super comfortable. And then you put the jeans on again and you're like, oh, my goodness. But I think it's a dear colleague of mine at work we mused on this today quite a bit and had a good laugh and thought, well, actually, hang on a second. Most women have to do this transition every winter where we have to put stockings back on, and it's awful. And for those first 2 weeks, you're like, what is this awful thing, with this crotch falling down and everything? But then you get used to it. So I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to put the jeans back on and suffer for 2 weeks and then forget about it, really, and keep going.
Do you think this is a democratisation of fashion, Eli? We're embracing comfort. We're not embracing glam or being fabulous. It's about actually super comfort.
Look, I hope not. Good, I reckon we should get back and we should embrace dressing up again.
So have you got an old faithful pair of trackies there, Eli?
Oh, absolutely. And they have gotten a lot of wear. But truly, as soon as, a couple of times I've tried to wear them out to a cafe and I can't. I'm not one of the people who can do it.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much for both your thoughts there. That is Eli Matthewson and Livia Esterhazy. Have a great day, won't you? But how have you been over lockdown, Livia? I haven't talked to you for quite some time. Have you managed?
Oh, I'm really blessed, to be honest. My family and I live in rural Wellington, basically, out in Macra. And so we've enjoyed beautiful walks in the bush and our pets and family. So I've been really blessed, to be honest. So it's been really good. And the team at WWF have taken it on their shoulders. So it's all good.
Good, nice to have you both back on. Eli Matthewson, Livia Esterhazy, thank you very much for being with us on Monday's panel. I'm Wallace Chapman, back with you tomorrow, 3:45. Till then, Checkpoint next.
Whakaronga mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Haere nei, level 2 just got a whole lot more social. Dancing's back on at weddings. Guest numbers can go up to 100 for church and funerals too. National's new leader announces his shadow cabinet. So who's up, who's down, who's sideways or even out? MP Amy Adams makes a political comeback before she'd even departed. COVID-19 recovery's her newly minted portfolio. Speaking of shifting ground, the earth moved in a few places today too. And the CEO of Stuff buys the media company from its Aussie owners for $1. So how does that work, and will more jobs go? And the government reveals an income relief payment for the newly unemployed. Is it just a better benefit for the middle class?
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata nei. The cap on the number of people allowed at gatherings under Alert Level 2 is lifting from 10 to 100. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says the new limit will come into effect at noon on Friday. The move comes as the country marks its third day in a row of no new cases. Ms Ardern says gatherings such as church services, weddings and funerals can now have 100 people present.
The move to 100 also allows community sport to operate more easily. Large-scale events like concerts will obviously still have those restrictions applied in terms of size. But the shift to 100-person maximum means many more gatherings will be able to occur from now on.
Jacinda Ardern says Cabinet will review Level 2 settings again on June the 8th and no later than June the 22nd will consider the move to Level 1. The National Party has labelled the government's new relief payment for those unemployed due to COVID-19 as ill-informed. A new 12-week payment will mean full-time workers can receive $490 a week while they search for new work or retrain. That's about double that of the normal job seeker benefit. National's newly appointed leader Todd Muller says while the party supports helping New Zealanders, the two-tiered system is a haphazard approach.
Our concern with that announcement, it's ill-defined because now and ill-directed, because now we have a scenario where if you were made unemployed in the last week of February, you get half the rate. If you're made unemployed from the 1st of March, it's $490.
Todd Muller says there needs to instead be a stronger focus on keeping businesses afloat. National MP Amy Adams has backtracked on her plans to leave politics at the election, saying she's happy to defer getting her life back to help the new leadership team. Ms Adams ran against and lost to former leader Simon Bridges during the last leadership race, but says her decision to stay isn't because of her preference to work with the new leader Todd Muller. Amy Adams says if the world had carried on as she knew it, she would have retired. But COVID-19 has changed things and she would have answered Mr Bridges' request for help too.
If he'd asked me to and if he'd said, look, we want you as part of the team and I see a role for you, of course I would have been open to that.
National's Amy Adams. The government has just announced relief funding for drought-stricken farmers in North Waikato and Northland. The Minister of Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, says $500,000 will be shared between the two regions and will be given to local mayoral drought relief funds to hand out. The money can be used for the purchase and delivery of feed supplies. It comes as farmers in parched regions say the rain over the past 24 hours is a case of being grateful for small mercies. NIWA says 8 to 15 millimetres of rain fell in Northland, Auckland, Hawke's Bay and North Canterbury, while in contrast Wellington and Taranaki got more than 40 millimetres. An independent midwife has been censured after mistaking a woman's progress during labour, which resulted in a baby's death. Labour continued for several hours in hospital, but the midwife mistook the vaginal wall for the baby's head. Catherine Hutton reports.
When the mistake was recognised, the midwife didn't report signs that the baby was in distress to the obstetrician. The Health and Disability Commission says the midwife was unsure who was responsible for managing the woman's labour in hospital. The baby was delivered by caesarean section, but required resuscitation and died in intensive care the next day. The Commission recommended the DHB develop guidelines as to who is responsible once a woman is admitted to hospital. The midwife also had to meet the requirements of the Midwifery Council Competence Programme. This is Catherine Hutton.
The Chief Executive of Stuff, who has bought the media company for $1 from Australian Nine Entertainment, says she has no other financial backers at this stage. Sinead Bauscher has told Checkpoint she will look to give Stuff a stake in the business through shares. Ms Bauscher says she has taken on the Stuff company with a mix of trepidation and excitement, but with no signed investors.
At the moment, it is just me. And being able to do that with Nine, just working over the last couple of weeks to secure that transfer of ownership, the next step now is to sit down and work out how to introduce a model that allows for some staff direct ownership and also leaves open, the ability for us to potentially bring in other investors or partners down the track.
You can hear the full interview with Sinead Bauscher on Checkpoint shortly. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. The New Zealand Breakers captain Tom Abercrombie says he was never planning on playing in the National Basketball League this year. The Tall Blacks forward and several other Breakers players have opted out of the revamped New Zealand NBL, which tips off next month. Some are citing concerns around workload and the new draft system, but Abercrombie says he does want other top Kiwi players to feature to make the competition better for fans.
I hope the majority of Tall Blacks and things do put their hand up to play, because ultimately the better calibre of players that are playing, the better the basketball is going to be for us all to watch. So hopefully they're able to put on a good show.
Tom Abercrombie. Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning have held off a late challenge from fellow US sport superstars Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady in a charity golf match in Florida. Woods, a 15 times major champion and 2-time Super Bowl winner Manning, secured victory on the final hole of the match, which raised more than $30 million for COVID-19 relief efforts. That's the news.
A drop in the bucket to solving the North Island's drought.
If you're $100,000 in the hole and you win a $5,000 scratchy, it's helpful, but a lot of work is left.
An earthquake while on air.
Just hold the line there for a second, Jim.
The mics are bouncing around in the studio.
Decide whether we need to jump under the desk.
Was felt most in Manawatu.
It was very, very big, and it felt like my house was on rollerblades.
Shake up your morning with Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, scattered showers. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, cloudy periods and the odd shower. Waitomo to Kapiti, also Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Occasional rain or showers today, fine spells tomorrow. Possible showers about Taranaki. Wellington and Wairarapa, periods of rain, easing this afternoon and evening. Cloudy periods and the odd shower for tomorrow. Nelson and Buller, remaining showers clearing from most places by tonight and becoming fine. A few showers continuing in the north. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from areas of cloud about Westland tonight. Marlborough to Southland, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, but some longer fine spells inland. And Chatham Islands, periods of rain today, heavy from tonight, showers tomorrow. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and you're with Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Church services and gatherings of up to 100 people have been given the green light to take place later this week. It comes after another day with no new COVID cases in New Zealand. Our third day in a row with 0 cases. That's given Cabinet the confidence to allow some more freedoms under Level 2. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern today said increasing gathering sizes, including religious gatherings, would come into effect at midday on Friday.
This means gatherings such as church services, weddings and funerals can now have 100 people present. There also no longer will be a need for funerals or tangihanga to pre-register via the Ministry of Health, as they had been previously doing to date. The move to 100 also allows community sport to operate more easily, and I understand sporting codes have been working on operational guidance with Sport New Zealand. Large-scale events like concerts will obviously still have those restrictions applied in terms of size, but the shift to 100-person maximum means many more gatherings will be able to occur from now on. These changes are good news for business and for those looking to plan larger gatherings. It's another step in renormalising of life as we continue to stamp out the virus.
Anyone heading to bars will still need to be seated and contact tracing will still be required. But further easing of restrictions looks to be on the cards.
It is the government's view that we should also move as quickly as we safely can to alert level 1. On that basis, Cabinet will check in again on our settings on the 8th of June. And we've agreed that no later than the 22nd of June, 4 weeks from today, we will consider then the move to alert level 1. The fact that we are even, and I should add, this is based on the advice of the Director General of Health who supported these recommendations and made these recommendations. The fact that we are even making these decisions shows the success we have had to date as a country in fighting the virus and highlights we can now make choices many others can't. In fact, the increase in gathering signs means we now have some of the most permissive settings of any of the countries we compare ourselves to, including Australia. Going hard and early has paid off for the economy, and now we need to just continue the level of vigilance that has got us here. We are still in a global pandemic. Cases continue to grow overseas, and we do still have people coming home. But for the most part, many aspects of life can and should feel much more normal. Let's not lose that advantage.
Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, says that plan for moving to level 1 allows for 2 full cycles of infection.
In effect, the outcome of our lockdown and the way that people supported that through alert levels 4 and 3 has paid huge dividends here. So we felt not only should we move to 100, but that we should spend then two-week periods in the full alert level 2 and then actively consider a possible move to alert level 1.
That was the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. The government also announced today it is introducing a new relief payment for those out of work due to COVID-19. The payment will be available for 12 weeks from June 8th for New Zealand citizens or residents who have lost their job since March 1st while they look for new employment or retrain. Those who lost full-time work will get $490 a week, and for former part-time workers, well, they'll get $250. We'll have more on this after 6 o'clock tonight. Senior National MP Amy Adams has backtracked on her retirement plans after last week's change of leadership and is ranked number 3 on the party's list following a minor reshuffle. 3 days after he defeated Simon Bridges, the new leader, Todd Muller, announced a Conservative reshuffle with many faces on the front bench remaining the same. He also said Simon Bridges remains unranked for now, having asked for time to reflect on his future. Shortly after, Mr Bridges shot out a text contradicting that, saying he's not considering his future and wants to make it clear he has every intention of staying on and standing for National in the election. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
It was Todd Muller's chance to stamp his mark, but apart from the changes at the top, the National Party front bench looks very similar to the lineup under Simon Bridges. He was asked why so many of Simon Bridges' supporters had kept their front bench positions.
My total focus on who is the best team to be able to develop an alternative, a model, an internal vision, and particularly a comprehensive economic plan for New Zealand. And all of those people that you outlined are tremendous contributors to the National Party.
One key difference is the return of Amy Adams, who's been given a new portfolio, COVID-19 recovery.
I thought that it was too great a loss for this country, not just the National Party, if Amy left us, in my opinion, with unfinished business. And I think we have, with Amy, the opportunity to have a tremendous contribution at a time of high national need.
Ms Adams announced last year she would stand down from Parliament. Nothing to do with the leadership, but what's changed now?
The last 8 weeks have changed everything, and like all of you, I've been watching the most remarkable suite of challenges face this country, and if I can be any help at all in helping New Zealand think about how it works its way through those challenges, then that's something I feel duty-bound as a proud Kiwi to do.
She was asked if she would have come back if Simon Bridges was still leader.
If he'd asked me to, and if he'd said, look, we want you as part of the team and I see a role for you, of course I would have been open to that.
As for Mr Bridges, Todd Muller said he had not yet been ranked.
He has simply asked for a bit of time, which I think is perfectly understandable, to be honest, to reflect with his family as to what the future holds for him. But I want to be very clear that if Simon Bridges chooses to put his hand up again and stand as the MP for Tauranga, he will be a part of a Todd Muller-led National Government Cabinet.
Just after the media conference had finished, Mr Bridges sent out a text saying, "Just to be clear, I am not considering my future, but am taking a small amount of time out to take stock after Friday's loss." Mr Bridges says he was offered justice but turned that down as he wanted foreign affairs, but that was refused. He says he is the candidate for Tauranga and intends to stand and help National win the election. And questions about Mr Muller's Make America great Trump hat kept on coming, with his deputy Nikki Kaye asked for her view.
I don't think we should get hung up on a political souvenir. We are facing the greatest economic crisis of a generation, and what we're totally focused on is the rebuild of our country.
Todd Muller has confirmed Paula Bennett will no longer be campaign chair, with that role given to senior MP Jerry Brownlee. Also on the front bench is Judith Collins. She becomes the party's spokesperson for economic and regional development and for Pike River re-entry. She's also the Shadow Attorney General. Michael Woodhouse gets health and is Associate Finance Spokesperson, and Louise Upston, Social Development and Investment. Former lobbyist Megan Campbell will be Acting Chief of Staff. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And third-ranked Amy Adams will join us live after the 6 o'clock news. The week got off to a shaky start for many people in Horowhenua after a strong earthquake rattled the lower North Island region this morning. More than 36,000 people across the country have reported feeling the 5.8 magnitude quake centred near Levin that hit just before 8 o'clock this morning. Katie Scotcher is in Horowhenua.
It's always difficult to get out of bed on a chilly Monday morning, but a 5.8 earthquake made it easier for thousands of people, including Faye Wicker in Levin.
I found myself on 3 stairs wondering where to go and holding onto the telly.
Michelle Kidd was also jolted out of bed. She says she heard a loud rumble at her Foxton home just before the shaking started.
I just grabbed my daughter and we just stood there waited for it to go away. But I saw the neighbours get under their back door and I thought, oh, maybe we should be under the door, but then it all stopped. It was so quick.
Faye Wicker says she was relieved when she arrived at the rug shop she owns in Levin this morning.
We have thousands of rolls of yarn out the back. So I believe a few things of yarn fell off, but nothing drastic. Didn't take too long to clean up.
The New World supermarket in the Horowhenua town also escaped relatively unscathed.
It wasn't too bad, just a few jars of cream cheese and a cleaning product. That's all we lost.
The store's owner, Matthew Rollinson, says he's feeling very lucky.
That was a fairly big shake and it went for quite a long time, I felt. I was upstairs at the time, so I came down and checked on everybody and it was a bit of a wake-up call.
Wellington Civil Defence says there are no reports of damage, but damage or not, the earthquake was still frightening for this woman, Jo, who was home alone at her Waitadere Beach property.
The biggest shake I've ever felt in my whole life. As far as I'm aware, there's no cracks or anything occurred or anything like that. A lot of things fell down, but that's about it. But it was scary.
GeoNet says there is no risk of a tsunami, but Bruce Davey, who lives at Otaki Beach, was still a little nervous.
It was long and strong and I just about got gone, but I decided I wouldn't.
However, Paul Douglas, who runs a butcher's in Levin, wasn't fazed by the short, sharp shake.
I just carried on, didn't go under the block, didn't stand anywhere, just did normal.
Unlike Paul, train services in the Wellington region were stopped so tracks could be inspected for damage. Services were all running back on timetable by early this afternoon, just in time for the commuter rush. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scotcher aho.
It is 17 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. Let us know what you think of National's reshuffle or the relaxed Level 2 rules. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The chief executive of Staff, who has bought the media company for $1 from Australian 9 Entertainment, says she has no other financial backers at this stage and will look to give Staff a stake in the business through shares. The buyout follows failed negotiations between NZME and 9. Staff boss and new buyer, Sinead Boucher, says she's pleased to bring the business and all its mastheads back to New Zealand ownership, all for just $1. I asked her if she's paying cash.
I don't know yet. I have until the end of the week to hand over the money, and I really am hoping that I get to front up with my cash, but I'm not sure.
So is it cause for celebration or does it fill you with trepidation?
Well, I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, I'm feeling really overwhelmed today by all the positive reaction I've had from staff and from readers and customers. But it's definitely a big undertaking and certainly not one that I, sort of planned out for my career when I started off at Aoraki School of Journalism in Timaru. But I think it's great to be able to bring the business into, New Zealand ownership and to look forward to a future where staff can have a direct stake in that and we can sort of be, more masters of our own destiny.
Okay, so who's in this with you? Who are your backers?
So at the moment, it is just me. And being able to do that with Nine, just working over the last couple of weeks to secure that transfer of ownership. The next step now is to sit down and work out how to introduce a model that allows for some staff direct ownership and also leaves open, the ability for us to potentially bring in other investors or partners down the track.
So do you have investors or partners lined up, or are you at this stage completely on your own here?
We haven't got anybody lined up, but over the last, it's been quite a long time since stuff has been up for sale in one way or another. And there are definitely, other businesses and other people that we would like to work more closely with or do some partnerships with who are also interested in that but have been deterred for a while by the uncertainty around our ownership and what that might mean.
So who?
I have no doubt there's lots of opportunities out there. Probably not anybody I would who would appreciate me talking about it in public now. But I think now that we're on our own and not part of a bigger company, it does definitely give us a lot of freedom to start to think about the kind of business we want to build out and who else we might want to work with to be able to achieve that.
So what have you taken on in terms of liability and debt? Is that all on you?
We haven't taken on any debts, but obviously have taken on the responsibility for the company, and with that comes the livelihoods for all the people who work here. So, that wasn't something that I took on lightly. But stuff has always been, even though it's been owned by an international parent in one way or another, it's always been self-funding and self-managing as a business. And so we were in a good position before we hit the COVID crisis. During those weeks of lockdown, the business was really severely impacted as advertising, fell away, not surprisingly. And now that so we can start to see we're sort of climbing out of that. We were able to manage our way through that with the help of the wage subsidy, with things like good cost management and staff taking a voluntary pay cut. But when we look ahead, and when I sort of entered this, it was on the understanding that we would need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet into the foreseeable.
So how are you going to do that? How quickly will you adapt or change the model, and what are you looking at?
I think the first thing I need to do is sit down with my executive team, who only heard about this morning also. And we were obviously already working on our initiatives and plans for the next financial year. And now we need to look at and consider those in the light of the change of ownership, whether they are still opportunities we want to pursue or whether we do things differently. So I think that's sort of the work that we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks.
You've got to do things differently, don't you, Sinead? You've got to do things differently because donation model, cap in hand, asking people for donations is not a long-term business model, is it?
Well, it has proven to be a very successful model for The Guardian. And I think when we introduce... So firstly, yes, we absolutely need to do things differently, as do, the rest of the media industry as well. We know our traditional media, our business models have been disrupted and challenged over the last few years. And a change of ownership is just not the magic solution to fixing all of that. During the COVID crisis, we launched the Stuff Supporters program, which we had been working on for a few months. It was just sort of probably fortuitous timing, where we ask readers to contribute financially to support the journalism they value. It's just another way of approaching something versus putting up a hard paywall or whatever else.
Will you look at a paywall, Sinead?
Well, we have looked at it already.
Again, though?
Oh, yeah. No, what I was going to say is we have looked at it as part of a general move to look at, I think, like the rest of the media industry, there's an understanding that you need to rely more on direct funding from readers versus advertisers to continue to flourish. So we definitely wouldn't rule it out in the future. But at this stage, we have been really pleased with the kind of reaction that people have had in the contributions model.
So did you make good money from that? I mean, what kind of money did you make from donations?
Well, I think we're still making, getting contributions coming through that every day. I would say that is probably comparable to what you would expect if you were launching a paywall at this stage. But saying that, it's really early on, and, we will just have to wait and see how that goes and, whether that's something that's sustainable.
So are people going to lose their jobs? And if so, how many?
Well, I have no plans like that at the moment. But again, this is not a magic solution to the sort of challenges that we're facing. Media was already under a lot of duress before we went into COVID, and we're already having to go through a period of transformation. And now, just about every industry and business, we're going to have to really grapple with what's ahead and make sure we can get ourselves into the kind of shape that keeps us fit for the future. But there is I have no plan in front of me right now around jobs or products or anything like that.
Are things improving for you under level 2?
Yes, they definitely are improving. I mean, we've gone from basically having very little advertising revenue to starting to see that pick back up as businesses are opening up again.
So are you a better prospect than NZME was then?
Well, I was very supportive of the NZME merger process because I could see the need to do something that was going to help put New Zealand journalism on a stronger foundation. But when it became clear that was not going to progress, that's why I started to discuss the option of an MBO with Nine. And I think it's a different option. It's not comparing apples with apples. One of them is a merger that might allow some consolidation of, back office costs and things like that. And the other is a chance for the business and its staff to take control of their own future and sort of, bring that energy and ideas in there and see what we can achieve.
So are you going to get rid of some of the newspaper titles? Will you sell off any of the newspapers?
Well, all of our newspapers are profitable, or certainly we're going into the COVID situation. And during that time, we saw an increase in subscriptions, as well as sort of record digital audiences, as naturally people were seeking the news. But you've got to be realistic that, people's habits are changing, advertising habits are changing down the track at some point in the future. I can't say that we will have all of our newspaper titles.
So have you got the money to pay the next round of wages?
Absolutely, and the rounds after that too.
And that is Sinead Boucher, who is the new owner of Stuff. Farmers in parched regions of the country say the rain that has fallen over the past 24 hours is a small reprieve, but it's no drought breaker. A front brought just 8 to 15 mils of rain to Northland, Auckland, Hawke's Bay and North Canterbury, while in contrast, Wellington and Taranaki got more than 40 mils. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
John Blackwell farms sheep and beef cattle on about 550 hectares south of Dargaville in Northland. He says the weekend's rain has left him feeling a little demoralised.
We've got 8 mils of rain, so that's not really much use. We haven't had any significant rain events this year. I think we've got 4 mils in January, 10 in February. Probably it doesn't do our morale any good when, you've got a rain event coming across and we only get 8 mils. We just wonder whether it will ever rain again.
Mr Blackwell says the north is the driest it's been in living memory, and he's worried about what the winter holds.
Well, the shortest day is only a few weeks away. We had a frost a few days ago. It's 19 degrees today, so things will happen, grass will grow, but it's very hard facing a winter with all your winter feed fed out, your farm's virtually eaten right out.
Mr Blackwell says some farmers may be forced to sell up if things don't improve. Federated Farmers North Canterbury President Cameron Henderson is trying to look on the bright side.
We do have the wet stuff falling from the sky, thankfully, so any rain is welcome rain given these conditions this year, but it's certainly not a drought breaker.
Mr Henderson says feed supply is the pressing problem.
Generally, most farmers would have relied on a bit of early autumn rain to green things up and grow a bit of winter feed, but it just hasn't happened this year. So really we're seeing pasture levels pretty low, and a lot of them are still looking pretty brown, to be honest. And winter feed crops are looking very poor too. So it's a feed supply issue that we're facing at the moment.
He's also worried about the temperature dropping.
We're quite welcoming of rain, so long as we end up with warm conditions that the pasture and the crops can use it after this. What we don't need is for it to turn cold, and if we get a lot of rain at the moment, that really we just see a lot of mud instead of growth. And rain without the temperatures to boost it actually makes things worse.
4 generations of Hadley Boyle's family have worked his Central Hawke's Bay property. He says the current drought is the worst in a century.
It's a little blessing, but it's definitely going to take a lot more of a follow-up and stay warm for a bit longer to make any real difference. Yeah, we just wouldn't expect years like this. The last year that was as low a rainfall as this would have been 1914.
Mr Boyle says last night's rain is the most the farm has seen in more than 6 months. NIWA Principal Scientist Forecasting, Chris Brandolino, says much more rain is needed to restore moisture levels.
10, 15, 20 millimetres of rain, sure, that's useful, but you need that to happen over, many days, over many months. So not just once, twice a month, 7, 8, 9, even 20 times a month. For multiple months, you'll need to really offset and bring things back to near normal.
Mr Brandolino says the forecast for the next 2 weeks is for unsettled weather, which could mean there's a chance for more rain. But the expectation over the next 2 months is for normal to below normal rainfall. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martin Aho.
On Checkpoint on RNZ National, we'd love your feedback. Get in touch about the political resurrection of Amy Adams. She will be on the program after 6. Another media outlet announces plans to slash 130 jobs. Our borders may be closed, but some international visitors are making the most of the Kiwi travel dream. You can text us 2101. You can get in touch tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We'd love to hear from you about what you think of the relaxed level 2 rules. Is anyone out there planning a wedding? Or let us know what you think of National's reshuffle. We'd love to hear from you too if you felt that earthquake this morning. So email as well, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to the headlines with Susanna.
The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says continued low COVID-19 numbers gave him confidence to recommend a 100-person limit at gatherings. From noon on Friday, the limit on gatherings such as funerals, weddings and sporting events will increase from 10 to 100. The government will review alert level 2 settings on June the 8th and consider the move to level 1 by June the 22nd at the latest. National MP Amy Adams says she's happy to defer her retirement from politics to stay and support the new leadership team. Ms Adams says her decision to stay isn't because of her preference to work with the new leader Todd Muller, and she would have done the same for Simon Bridges if asked to. The opposition says the government's new relief payment for those unemployed due to COVID-19 is ill-informed, as it's about double that of the normal job seeker benefit. The new 12-week payment will give former full-time workers $490 a week while they search for new employment or retrain. The government has also just announced relief funding for drought-stricken farmers in North Waikato and Northland. The Minister of Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, says $500,000 will be shared between the two regions and will be given to local mayoral drought relief funds to hand out. An independent midwife has been censured after mistaking a woman's progress during labour, which resulted in a baby's death. The Health and Disability Commission says the midwife was unsure who was responsible for managing the woman's labour in hospital. The Chief Executive of Staff, who has bought the media company for $1 from Australian Nine Entertainment, says she's pleased to bring the business and all its mastheads back to New Zealand ownership. Sinead Boucher has told Checkpoint Staff now has a lot more freedom to think about what kind of business it wants to be and who it would like to work with. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. You're with Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time for the business news now with Emma Hatton. Emma, the country's biggest property company, well, it's reporting a bit of a hard knock to its bottom line. I'm assuming this is all because of COVID-19?
Yes, kia ora, Lisa. Not much that we do around here that isn't related to COVID-19 at the moment. So we're talking about Kiwi Property Group, and it released its full year results today. So like you say, this is the country's biggest property company. Its portfolio is worth around $3 billion, and it owns a whole range of property. It's got retail, office, industrial. It owns Sylvia Park, the big shopping mall in Auckland. So that company has reported a loss of $186.7 million. And that's because it had to write down how much its assets were worth. So it had to cut the value of its property holdings by $290 million. So while it made a loss there on its bottom line because of that, its revenue was actually up and occupancy was high. So it was only because of that write-down, which they're attributing to COVID-19, that happened. The company also is saying that during the first quarter of this financial year, it's also deferred about $20 million worth of rent payments. So that's money owing by its tenants because it wants to keep its tenants. So it's hoping that some of that cost, which it is losing this quarter, will be offset because of the tax changes for the depreciation for commercial buildings. So it's hoping that it will offset some of that. But obviously, it's just they want to hold on to those tenants, so they're willing to wait it out there. And I mean, despite the challenges that this company is having, it seems to remain optimistic. And so it's, for instance, it's saying it will carry on with the planned expansion of its Sylvia Park retail and office complex.
OK, so let's turn now to New Zealanders' financial resilience and wellbeing. There's a new survey that shows it's taken a bit of a knock as well, again due to COVID-19.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a survey done by the Financial Services Council, and it's the first of a series that the council plans on doing, and it's to track how Kiwis feel on sort of various financial indicators, and it creates this index about how people are feeling and what their financial well-being's like. And why this survey is really interesting is it shows the speed, I guess, at which COVID-19 really became quite real for New Zealanders. So it basically pinpoints that trajectory where it became more than just this, distant international problem and the moment that it kind of reached our shores. So in March 15, 15% of people felt that COVID-19 was impacting on our job security. And by late April, that jumped to half. So massive jump there. So you can see, the moment that it obviously was very real for New Zealand. And the survey also found it changed how risky our investments were, what our risk appetite was like, and that was shown through a 20% jump in people looking for low-risk investments. So that's going from March to April. Obviously a lot more people looking for less risky investments, and we saw a lot of outcry at the time when people realised their KiwiSaver balances were dropping and things like that. And on that note, the survey also found more than 50% of people don't feel like they're on track for retirement. Also really stark from the survey is more than 40% of us now worry about money at least once a week, and that's having an impact on people's mental health. So this survey will be done again to track those various indicators and, the changes from month to month. And the council hopes that it can be used to sort of help drive conversation, use it as data around how New Zealand can build better financial resilience and capability and overall well-being for people as we work our way through this crisis.
OK, well, shall we take a quick spin around the markets before you head off?
Yes, so the NZX Top 50 Index rose, closing the day up 1.1%, 113 points to 10,776. The New Zealand dollar, a little unchanged, little change there at a touch under 61 US cents, 93.3 Australian and 50.1 British pence.
Thank you, Emma. That is Emma Hatton with our business news. An elderly Christchurch couple is crying foul over EQC's site visit policy under Alert Level 2. EQC says the measures outlined in emails to clients are crucial for staff and customer safety. But John and Frances Van Petegem, who have been waiting years to have their botched earthquake repairs put right, say EQC's rules are causing further delays and stress. Nick Trubridge has the story.
John and Frances Van Petegem have waited nearly a decade for their coastal Canterbury home to be properly repaired.
It's
ruined our life. It really has, because, we've been married since 1965. We've had a very good life together, and yet this puts you all on hold. John can't settle. I get cross with it. I'm all right if I'm kept busy, but the minute I'm not, I just think, how can people do this to people? How can you rip off old people?
Now the elderly couple face yet another hurdle. Under Alert Level 2, EQC is telling clients that management and in some cases senior management sign-off is required before any site visits to assess or fix damage can go ahead. Even then, staff are telling EQC customers there's no guarantee such visits will take place. Deputy Chief Executive Renee Walker says the process should be quick.
The only thing that needs to be signed off by senior management is a visit to a vulnerable homeowner's home, and that again is just to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do from a health and safety perspective, and as long as we are satisfied that we're keeping people safe, those visits are signed off. In terms of the management piece, it really is just a check to see that the contractor has their plans in place, that we've asked those risk assessment questions, and that everyone's satisfied that the visit can go ahead. But it's a 5-minute check. It's not an onerous process.
But the Van Petegrims have been waiting since May 13 for EQC to assess defective repairs at their property. They expected a site visit months ago, but Level 4 restrictions dashed those hopes.
You don't want to go away in the week because they might ring up and say they're going to come out and see you. So your whole life is put on hold.
Walker says the policy is in place to keep people safe and strict protocols are followed.
I don't think there's been anything that I haven't approved myself, as long as we know that there's a site plan in place and that there's no one vulnerable in the home, or if there is, that we've got a plan to manage that vulnerability.
She didn't know how many customers were experiencing delays as a result of the Alert Level 2 policy, but promised to look into any cases like the Van Petegrims.
No, I don't, sorry. But if there are specific examples, as I say, I wouldn't expect that anyone is waiting pending approval, because it is simply the case manager reviews the case, looks at it, asks for approval, the approval is given and the visit's booked in, and the only coordination there then is with whoever's going to do the site visit. So if there are specific examples where people believe there is a delay, I would be more than happy to look at that, because the process is not designed to delay anything at all, and I'd be disappointed to think that it is.
Despite not knowing the numbers, Walker claimed very few would be impacted.
The only reason would be if the person conducting the visit has a backlog of assessments. So, for example, none of our contractors could go on site, none of our engineers could go on site during Level 4. So we do have a backlog of probably about 200 jobs that we need to schedule in to get those contractors out. But as soon as the request for approval comes through, I know anything that comes through to me is signed off within the hour, so there shouldn't be people waiting a week to have site visits signed off. It might just be about the scheduling of the experts that need to get out to do it.
Meanwhile, EQC is still working to resolve 1,500 claims from the 2010 and 2011 Canterbury earthquakes. It's also working through 800 expressions of interest as part of its on-sold program, where Cantabs have bought properties only to discover unrepaired damage that is over the EQC cap of $150,000. And while the Crown-owned insurer has no timeline to wrap up its activities in Canterbury, back in New Brighton, the Van Petegrims desperately want to get on with their lives.
You know, this happened in 2011. Well, it's 2020. You know, this is disgraceful. I've been to funerals where people have died through stress from, you know, this thing, older people.
John and Francis just want their earthquake insurance nightmare to be over. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
Doctors fear a rise in the potentially devastating childhood disease rheumatic fever could get worse as the effects of the COVID-19 lockdown hit. A public health alert has been issued for Wellington after a sudden spike in the number of children with the disease there this year. But there could be more cases brewing that haven't yet come to light. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
Rheumatic fever is a preventable childhood disease that can cast a devastating lifelong shadow. It can lead to serious heart problems and take years off people's lives. There's been a 25% increase nationally this year. GP and Auckland Medical School Associate Professor Martere Harwood says the situation's a real worry.
the fact that we're seeing this spike, despite all the hard work that we've done over the last few years to try and bring the figures down, is really disappointing but really sad for our whānau.
A senior lecturer at the Auckland School of Medicine, Annika Anderson, fears there may be worse to come. The lockdown meant many people were confined to crowded homes or didn't feel able to see their GPs, and school-based health programs were closed. She says because rheumatic fever is a complication of strep throat, there can be a lag from when a child starts to develop it until when they're diagnosed.
I am worried, and I think I'm particularly worried that it's already our quite disadvantaged populations are going to be further disadvantaged from lockdown.
Rheumatic fever disproportionately affects Māori and Pacific children. After a dip in 2016, it's been steadily on the rise, with a lot of variation across DHBs. Like most of the doctors RNZ's spoken to, Dr Anderson says the government's taken its foot off the brake. She says she'd love to see the energy and the coordinated approach of the COVID-19 fight applied to rheumatic fever.
If we could do something about the housing, something about the poverty, we wouldn't be seeing these inequitable outcomes.
Wellington Medical Officer of Health Craig Thornley issued the public health alert for the region and says he still doesn't know what's caused the surge, but he says it's important to try to get on top of the situation.
We felt it was important that primary healthcare providers in our region are aware that they know that rheumatic fever hasn't gone away, to be thinking carefully when a patient of Māori Pacific child presents with a sore throat to make sure that they're tested properly.
Rates also appear to be rising in Waikato, with the DHB reporting 11 cases so far this year. Last year it had a total of 13. Most DHBs say it's too early to see any impact the lockdown may have had in their figures. Of those that responded to RNZ's requests, Northland, Hawke's Bay, Lakes and Tairāwhiti all say their rates are stable. Auckland's Regional Public Health Service says anecdotally the number of cases looks to be about the same. Dr Harwood says it's about time to put solving the problem into the hands of those who can really make a difference.
We need Māori and Pacific leadership to address this if we're going to see these numbers come back down again, because otherwise we will see the devastating impact in many years to come. We'll have these children living with this disease for the rest of their lives, and that's just unacceptable.
The Ministry of Health says it's too early to draw conclusions on this year's data. It says the increases seen in Wellington could be due to the variability sometimes seen when there are small numbers at play. And it says it's important to work with the DHBs to monitor the trends and make sure the services that are in place to prevent the disease continue to be effective. For Checkpoint, ko Rowan Quinn tēnei.
It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback. So remember, you can get in touch via text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Boris Johnson is coming under immense scrutiny for staunchly defending his top advisor, who is accused of breaching lockdown rules. Dominic Cummings drove about 400 kilometres from his London home with his wife, who was displaying COVID-19 symptoms. The UK Prime Minister says Mr Cummings was following his instincts as a family man. The BBC's Ian Watson filed this report.
Here's a call for you to go. What do you say to them? What do you say to Steve?
Why did you not stay in your primary residence, Mr Cummings, as the government guidelines state? Why did you go 260 miles across the country?
Dominic Cummings' family travelled 250 miles away from his London home to isolate in Durham when his wife already had coronavirus symptoms, citing concerns over childcare. Though he faced something of a scrum here, the BBC maintained social distancing, but the Prime Minister held him close and faced down calls for him to go.
Mind your fingers.
I think he followed the instincts of every father and every parent, and I do not mark him down for that. I believe that in every respect he has acted responsibly and legally and with integrity.
The UK was placed into lockdown with strict limitations on travel on March the 23rd. The last time that Dominic Cummings was seen before developing COVID symptoms was in Downing Street on the 27th of March. Durham police were made aware of reports that an individual had travelled from London to Durham on the 31st of March. And the following day, a police officer spoke to Mr Cummings' father at his father's request. Dominic Cummings then returned to work in London on April the 14th. Government ministers say Dominic Cummings and his immediate family were hunkered down at a property adjacent to his parents' home in Durham. But the Mirror and Observer newspapers and the BBC have spoken to a member of the public who claims he saw Mr Cummings in the town of Barnard Castle, 30 miles away, on Easter Sunday, when the message was stay at home. He has now formally complained to the police. So, the voters in County Durham have clear views.
I think when someone like him, who's obviously giving advice to the Prime Minister, doesn't adhere to the rules, it makes it even more confusing for the average person.
Other people have been in the same situation and they've managed, so why shouldn't he manage?
We're all trying to keep in, right? 10 weeks I was in, and he's out, he's flouting the rules. It's all wrong. They should sack him.
And the Labour leader seems to share those views.
This was a huge test of the Prime Minister, and he's just failed that test. He hasn't sacked Dominic Cummings, he hasn't called for an investigation, and he's treating the British public with contempt. If I were Prime Minister, I'd have sacked Cummings.
Why are you guys not social distancing? How many lives?
Dominic Cummings seems secure in his job for now, but many MPs are worried that faith in the government's guidelines is far more shaky.
The BBC's Ian Watson there. And with the number of coronavirus deaths in the US close to surging past 100,000, Donald Trump remains focused on reopening the country. And he's leading by example, playing his second round of golf in 2 days. Lockdown restrictions have eased, but the ABC's David Lipson reports there are a few signs of an economic recovery.
Shared on social media, video of an epic pool party in Missouri. Hundreds packed together, flouting social distancing restrictions. That is the exception, not the rule. This holiday weekend, Americans have been out and about, but beaches and bars aren't nearly as packed as normal, even though all 50 states have now started to reopen. The nervous lull continues to brutalise the economy and American livelihoods. Unemployment edged 15% last month. Senior White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett says that was an undercount. Speaking on CNN, he predicted it'll go higher next month.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a bit higher. And you know, there were some technical things they kind of messed up, and on an economics lecture we go into them, but it could be if they fix the numbers and fix the thing that they mischaracterized last time, that you'll end up with a number north of 20%.
He predicted unemployment would peak in June and the recovery would be slow, with a possible double-digit jobless rate when Americans vote in the presidential election.
You know, you're going to be starting at a number in the 20s and working your way down, and so of course you could still not be back to full employment by September or October.
The US president insisted the economy would come roaring back, but away from Wall Street it hasn't happened, with the number of infections and deaths already far exceeding the modelling presented just last month. On April 10, White House Coronavirus Task Force Director Dr. Deborah Birx pointed to a downgrading of the predicted death toll.
Remember, just a week ago it was 80,000. Now it's 60,000.
6 weeks on, almost 100,000 are dead. Updated modelling now predicts close to 150,000 will lose their lives. On Fox News, Dr. Birx was pressed by host Chris Wallace, but offered little explanation.
Did we reopen without sufficient restriction?
What I was saying in that briefing that you were talking about is what that current model was showing. There are different models we have been using all along.
Donald Trump was back on his golf course in Virginia. He tweeted cases, numbers and deaths are going down all over the country.
The ABC's David Lipson there. Our borders may be closed, but some international backpackers are still making the most of their New Zealand travel dreams. There are estimated to be up to 150,000 overseas visitors still in the country, and despite various repatriation flights, many have decided to stay on. Our cameraman Simon Rogers and reporter Nita Blake-Person spoke to some of them.
New Zealand has long been a mecca for backpackers, and for some lucky travellers, their dream of seeing the country is still alive.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like I'm stuck. Like, it's quite nice, good weather, can check out some waterfalls, visit the park, whatever. So, feels good.
Belgian backpacker Matt Klaus arrived in New Zealand last March. He thought about heading home when the COVID situation started to get serious, but decided it wasn't the best option.
Oh, it's way better here because your government is taking care of it way better than anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, look at 6-7 weeks later, it's all good. We're walking around freely and my country is still making stupid decisions. So, yeah, a lot better here.
He's not alone. There are estimated to be between 130 and 150,000 visitors from overseas in Aotearoa at the moment. Of course, not all of those are backpackers, but Matt Klaus says the ones who are here to make the most of it.
I think the people who are now still here are the people who are relaxed about the situation and knew that New Zealand was going to take care of it. Because a lot of the young German backpackers, they all went home in panic. And we were a bit like, why would you go home? Because the situation back home is a lot worse than here. I feel I'm less nervous about finding a job here in New Zealand as a backpacker than back home. Like, really? All this year I had to send maybe 3 emails and within 2 days you have a reply, you can start Monday. Because like we're doing the easy jobs, kiwi picking, vineyard work, whatever. Like you don't need degrees or whatever for that, so.
Mats is living at a Papamoa holiday park. The place is full with people in the same boat, like Chilean Mario Moncado, who can't get home.
I couldn't, because there's no tickets. I tried to buy one, but was not possible. So I had to stay here and try to move to the town I was. I was in Hastings, so I moved here to try to make some money.
He's camping to keep costs down and making the most of being in New Zealand.
And I think that it's good to be here because it's quiet. It's like peace place. I think it's better to be here, but I also miss my family, my friends.
Frenchman Antoine Casanova is staying in his van at the same park. He hightailed it to the Bay of Plenty when his work in Queenstown dried up.
A few days before lockdown, heaps of people were leaving Queenstown, going back home if they could. And after when lockdown has been removed, many people have been fired in Queenstown, so they also decided to leave and go back home, and others to go somewhere else to find any job in farm or in a factory.
And he plans on sticking around.
New Zealand is still safer than France, so I'm gonna try to stay here as long as I can. But if in one way I'm running out of money, or if it's not even more possible for me to stay in New Zealand, I'm gonna go back here, I think, in France.
Further up the coast, the backpackers start to thin out. The summer hotspot of the Coromandel Peninsula was already starting to quieten down for winter, but lockdown meant that hibernation began earlier than expected. Luke Minero managed to find a spot at Whangamata's holiday park to see out level 3 and level 4.
At first, I had a lot of doubt, if I should go back home or stay here. Then I had my mom on the phone. She told me that the situation was really bad in France, so maybe I should stay here. And then I had the opportunity to stay here thanks to Sarah and Dean, the owner of the campground. So yeah, I just decided to stay here, and it's a really good place to be stuck in. Whangamata is really beautiful.
He also left Queenstown when things started to turn and is now looking forward to exploring the North Island.
I think for me it will be great, actually, because less tourists. I know it's a bad thing for New Zealand, but for me especially it will be quite good because I can do, for example, Tongariro, which is supposed to be really crowded usually, so maybe there will be less people doing it. And also, all these wonderful places which usually are packed with people, maybe it will be more pleasant to do it now.
And while New Zealand's restrictions ease, Luke says he looks home with concern.
You kind of feel guilty, because you're here, the weather is good, it's a wonderful country, people are nice, and everywhere else in the world it's going kind of bad,
A lucky break for those who still get to enjoy our country while the borders are closed. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And if you were listening to that on the radio, you can go back and look at the video from Nita's piece. We'll put it on our Facebook page and online. A lot of you getting in touch this evening about, well, the National Party and their reshuffle. But let's start with the earthquake first. Chris has got in touch to say, I was in my hotel room on the 14th floor this morning in Wellington with the earthquake hit. Scary. Chris is waiting for a flight home too. Someone else says, I live in Levin and I'm sure Fluffy the cat was more scared than I was. Today we have the ongoing national drama with some wild weather and an earthquake all mixed in with the ongoing pandemic. Yeah, it does feel a bit like the perfect storm, doesn't it? Someone else has got in touch to say Amy Adams is a masterstroke by Muller. This is Amy Adams getting, well, the number 3 spot in National and a new portfolio, the COVID-19 recovery portfolio. Kate has got in touch to say, I am pleased to see a change in leader for National. Todd Muller appears to be a good speaker so far, and the debate come election time will be a lot more eloquent. As yet he's unproven, and I'm yet to decide, however. I have noticed a difference between him and Jacinda Ardern. Todd uses I, my team, my party. He speaks of a long-term childhood desire to be a president. Jacinda uses language of inclusiveness, we, our, the Labour Party, rather than my party. It's subtle, says Kate, but I can't help wondering about the ego and the desire for presidential status over the job of governance. Today's press conference was full of being ready to serve, quite an American style, she says. Time will tell if he has the ability to lose the ego and personal ambition in order to govern on behalf of everyone. Politicians who tell us we have more important things to talk about than a Trump hat souvenir are quite right, says Vicky, but they can't make us not make a judgment about it by merely telling us not to. And someone else has got in touch to say, you might ask Amy Adams if she was so passionate about helping National with COVID-19 and the recovery, why she didn't do it under Simon Bridges' leadership. Why didn't she reverse her earlier decision to retire and volunteer her services to Simon instead of waiting for Todd Muller? Well, we'll ask her after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The Director General of Health says continued low COVID-19 numbers gave him confidence to jump straight to a 100-person limit at gatherings. From noon on Friday, the limit on gatherings such as funerals and weddings will increase from 10 to 100. Restaurants and bars will be able to take larger bookings from then, but will still have to adhere to social distancing regulations. Cabinet will review the Alert Level 2 settings again on June the 8th and will consider whether to move to Level 1 by June the 22nd. But Dr Ashley Bloomfield says with only 3 cases in the past 14 days, he felt confident recommending increasing to the full group size.
The outcome of our lockdown and the way that people supported that through Alert Levels 4 and 3 has paid huge dividends here. So we felt not only should we move to 100, but that we should spend then two-week periods and then actively consider a possible move to Alert Level 1.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says interstate travel bans in Australia wouldn't be a barrier to a trans-Tasman bubble. Australia and New Zealand have agreed to work towards opening the borders to allow free travel between the two nations. This morning, Jacinda Ardern indicated that would be unlikely before Australian state travel restrictions are lifted. However, this afternoon she clarified that it wouldn't be an issue if these were in place from New Zealand's perspective.
There's nothing on our end that means that would be problematic. It's ultimately over to Australia. I would anticipate that they probably want to resolve that movement issue first, but still, as I say, that's absolutely a matter for Australia.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. The former National leader Simon Bridges says he wants to make it clear he'll be staying on as an MP and will contest the election. That's in response to comments made by the new leader Todd Muller when revealing his caucus reshuffle. Here's our political editor Jane Patterson.
Mr Muller told reporters he had not allocated Simon Bridges a portfolio as he needed time to reflect on his future. He said if Mr Bridges chose chose to put up his hand again and stand as the MP for Tauranga, he'd be welcomed as part of the team. Soon after, Mr Bridges shot out a text saying, "Just to be clear, I am not considering my future, but I'm taking a small amount of time out to take stock." He says he was offered justice but turned that down as he wanted foreign affairs, but that was refused. Mr Bridges says he intends to stand in Tauranga and help National win the election. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
The government has announced relief funding for drought-stricken farmers in North Waikato and Northland. The Minister of Agriculture says $500,000 will be shared between the two regions and can be used for the purchase and delivery of feed supplies. Damien O'Connor says the money will go to mayoral relief funds and final decisions on how it is spent will be made locally.
We'll leave it to people on the ground to specify how best to distribute that. It's far better to do that than come up with a complex regime from Wellington that often misses the mark.
Damien O'Connor says the money should be available by the end of the week. The full impact of the COVID-19 lockdown on rheumatic fever rates is yet to be seen. Wellington has had a sudden spike in cases of the preventable childhood disease, which can cause lifelong heart problems, and there has been a smaller rise nationwide. Some doctors are worried a lack of access to GPs in lockdown, as well as overcrowding, may have made the situation worse. A senior lecturer at the Auckland School of Medicine, Annika Anderson, says because the disease is a complication of strep throat, there can be a lag in when it appears.
I am worried, and I think I'm particularly worried that it's already our quite disadvantaged populations are going to be further disadvantaged from lockdown.
Dr. Annika Anderson. The Dunedin City Council has voted to restore an advisory group to help with the redevelopment of its main street. The council has been discussing a revamp of George Street at a meeting today. The vote was split 10-4 in favour of reforming a central city advisory group to provide feedback on any revamp proposals and to continue with plans to reshape the retail quarter. Council staff are expected to report back next month. It's 6:04. The Australian Rugby League Commission is working towards playing NRL games in front of fans as soon as July. Commission Chair Peter Vlandis wants to have capped crowds back for matches while still observing physical distancing. If possible, it would make rugby league one of the few sports in the world to be operating with spectators. Injured Warriors forward Jazz Teavanga says fans are the reason players run out on the field.
You draw energy from the crowd and it looks a bit boring without no fans, to be honest, but hopefully when things start to die down, we can get some crowd in there.
Jazz Teavanga. Names are flooding in on day one of registrations for the New Zealand National Basketball League's first player draft. Revamped because of COVID-19, the 2020 NBL is set to start later next month and will involve 7 teams based in Auckland for 6 weeks. The 84 players for the competition will be selected through a draft on June the 11th. More than 150 players have signed up since registrations opened at midnight last night. That's the news.
I'm Catherine Ryan. Tomorrow on 9 to noon, the visa holders stuck overseas denied entry to New Zealand and their jobs, homes and schools. Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz on lessons from the GFC and why green projects create more jobs. Best-selling American author Curtis Sittenfeld on her latest novel, which imagines what would have happened if Hillary Clinton had not married Bill. Join me on 9 to noon on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, scattered showers. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape, cloudy periods and the odd shower. Waitomo to Kapiti, also Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Occasional rain or showers today, fine spells tomorrow and possible showers about Taranaki. For Wellington and Wairarapa, periods of rain easing this afternoon and evening. Cloudy periods and the odd shower tomorrow. Nelson and Bulla, remaining showers clearing from most places tonight and becoming fine. A few showers continuing in the north. Westland and Fiordland fine apart from areas of cloud about Westland until tonight. Marlborough to Southland mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle. Some long fine spells inland. And Chatham Islands periods of rain today, heavy from tonight, showers tomorrow. RNZ National. It's almost 6:07.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's an epic political resurrection. National MP Amy Adams has cancelled plans to retire from Parliament to instead take the number 3 spot in the party's shadow cabinet. The former Justice, Social Housing and Social Investment Minister announced her departure from politics last year after an unsuccessful tilt at the leadership. A candidate had already been selected for her Selwyn electorate. National's new leader, Todd Muller, revealed Amy Adams will take on the newly created portfolio of COVID-19 recovery. Amy Adams joins me now. You got bored of retirement pretty quickly, didn't you?
Someone did suggest that the 7-week lockdown might have been enough family time for me, but no. I was really looking forward to, my political retirement, and one day I'm still looking forward to it, but for now I'm happy to put it on ice and see what I can do to help.
When exactly did you decide to stay on?
Well, look, Todd didn't formally offer me the role until after he'd been elected, so over the weekend. He'd certainly had conversations with me about expressing a view that he thought that I had some real skills that the country would need in the next little period, which was obviously very flattering.
When did those conversations start?
Todd and Nikki and I are good mates. As you would expect, we look at what's happening in the world and talk about things. It didn't firm up in any sort of offer until pretty recently, obviously, when Todd made the final decision that he was going to have a tilt at the leadership.
Can you name the day that happened? When did it firm up?
When did it firm up?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, not until after Todd made the decision. I think it was the Wednesday before the poll that he would mount a challenge. And at that point, he certainly said, "Look, Amy, I've talked to you before about it. I think it would be important, and if I do win on Friday, then I'd really like to have you staying on." And I indicated that, yep, if we have that, if that was to happen, then I'd be happy to do it.
So tell me, the conversations that you'd had before the job was firmed up, when did you started discussing the fact that he'd like to keep you in Parliament? When were the first conversations? 2 weeks, a month ago, 2 months?
Yeah, I don't think you can quite characterise it like that because
Why not?
Todd wasn't the leader.
Or is it just reluctant? Are you just reluctant to tell us that?
No, I'm just trying to give you the context. We were having discussions in the context of colleagues about the challenges that New Zealand was facing and how we were going to address those. And Todd had expressed a view to me, and this is all in the context of the COVID period, and really just largely through the last month before the change of leader, saying that he thought that I should be thinking about staying on, and I've said, well, obviously that's not a matter, it's not a call for me, because I no longer have a seat, as you mentioned in your intro, and so obviously that's something that the party and the board would have to ask me to do. And as I said, once things picked up pace and Todd made a formal decision to challenge, then he indicated to me that if he was successful, he'd like me to stay. And then, as I said, once he was successful, that's when he formally asked me to do so, and I agreed.
So can we take it that you voted for him in the leadership spell?
I'm a great believer in the secrecy of caucus ballots, and I'm not going to speculate on what we do in caucus.
Why not have the courage of your convictions and let us know where you stand here?
Well, it's not a matter of courage, it's a matter of respect for our caucus processes, and I think if MPs start revealing who they voted for, then other MPs are put under pressure to do it, and I've always believed that caucus proceedings are confidential, and I will always respect that. I don't think it's a matter of courage, I think it's a matter of respect for our processes.
Would you have stayed on for anyone else?
Oh, look, if another leader had said to me, look, we really would like you to stay on, I would have considered it in exactly the same way.
So did Simon Bridges never ask you to stay on?
Not in the context of COVID. As I said, when I made the decision to step down, at that point, I thought the party was tracking along pretty well. They had everything in hand. They certainly, in my view, could manage very well without me, and I was looking forward to being a little bit selfish and heading off into a quieter life. As I said, post-COVID, things changed, and suddenly all of us across Parliament are grappling with a whole range of never-before-seen challenges. And if there's a view that I can help in some way with that, then I'm absolutely wanting to do that.
Okay, so what is the core plank, the main plank of your COVID-19 recovery plan?
Well, the core plank, first of all, is to have a plan that is not only integrated but is comprehensive and is set up to be delivered. I think there's been a lot of talk and good intentions expressed, and I think what we need to do to be effective is to recognise that this is absolutely an economic crisis, and we've already been talking a bit about that as a party, and we'll continue to put out more details. But actually it's also a crisis in how we think about and provide for our vulnerable as we see big escalations in those numbers. It's a crisis in terms of how we think about skills training and allowing people to pivot. It's a crisis in terms of how we think about health and providing health. It's a crisis around our borders and our international linkages. And I'm certainly not going to be leading every piece of that. We have a range of talented colleagues. My job is to be ensuring that all the pieces are coordinated, work well together, are well understood, and are in a position to be able to be delivered if we're successful at the election.
But nothing of that tells me what you would do. So what is the first thing you would do?
That's because, Lisa, it's not my job or the right time for me to be announcing core steps of policy. Of course, we will be doing that as we get closer to the election and the normal campaign process, but it's certainly not my intention on the first day in the job and before my colleagues have even really had the chance to adjust to their new portfolios for some of them, to usurp their roles in that. My job is to work across colleagues and across the leadership team and make sure we have a plan that is, as I say, comprehensive and well integrated. And that's not something we're going to be announcing the first steps of today.
So you've been having conversations with Todd Muller about the possibility of staying on for some time, but you do not have any formulation of a plan at this point for this newly minted portfolio.
Well, until Friday, Todd was not the leader, and as I say, I'd had no request from the leader, and we hadn't even firmed up what me staying on would look like and what role that would be in. Todd and I have certainly had discussions, over the last few days particularly, and in the weeks leading up to that, around some of the challenges that New Zealand was facing. And of course, we've got some thinking, but now is not the time that I'm going to announce that. We will be making those announcements at the right time and with the right people involved in the right portfolios. I know it's very tempting to want to get it all now, but we're going to work through that in our own time and processes and as I say, make announcements when the time is right.
So did you come up with the portfolio or did he come to you with that idea?
No, Todd had a very clear view that he saw a role for making the COVID recovery plan the centre point of our policy process and thinking. And he wanted someone to coordinate that, and he asked me to fill that role.
Do you think the time to open the borders is now?
Oh, look, I'm going to be very respectful of the fact that there are people working in those areas in a great deal of depth. I've stepped into this role today, and one of the rules I try and stick to in politics is to make sure I've acquainted myself with all the information before I fire off information. I think we have to be very careful around the time in which we open our borders. Border protection is the best protection we have against this virus around the globe. That can't be rushed into, but equally I think it is critical that we have a plan and move towards that as fast as can safely be done.
Have you spoken to Simon Bridges since he was rolled?
I had a few brief words with him on Friday, and Simon, of course, has been away in Tauranga mostly since then, so I haven't spoken to him since he left the building, but I had a few brief words with him on Friday.
So you don't know how he's doing?
No, look, I haven't been having those discussions over the weekend. That's something that Todd has been talking to Simon about.
You've jumped quite a few people on the list and in the stakes within National. Surprisingly, obviously, because you had planned to retire. Is everybody happy with that and happy with their lot?
In reshuffles, there's always people who are very pleased. There's always people who would have liked different outcomes. The only contact I've had from colleagues, and I've had quite a bit today, has been very encouraging of having me still in the building and still being part of the team, and that's been really nice. But ultimately, the decisions were Todd's. The discussions he's had with colleagues about where they all sit are discussions he's had with them, and they will have communicated with him, obviously more fulsomely than they have with me around their sense of how everything's sitting.
So who's unhappy then?
Well, that's the point I just made, that those are the conversations that they have had with Todd.
You said deeper conversations with him, but have you had an indication that some people are not happy?
No, I'm just simply saying that Todd is the one who has the discussions with MPs, so I'm not in a position to reflect on how people are responding. I only know who's been in contact with me, and the people who have been in touch with me have been very positive in the whole, in terms of my role in staying on, or actually very positive. I haven't had any negative comment, but I simply can't speculate around what colleagues in the caucus are thinking and feeling.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is National MP Amy Adams, who is no longer going into political retirement. She's taking on the newly created portfolio of COVID-19 recovery for her party. It is almost 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The government is loosening up the limit of social gatherings before the weekend, and a decision on when the country moves to level 1 is just weeks away. Social gatherings of up to 100 people will be allowed from midday Friday. Meanwhile, the government has set up a new relief payment for those now finding themselves out of work due to COVID-19. Here's our political reporter, Charlie Drever.
New Zealanders' good behaviour during level 4 and 3 is now paying off. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says, unlike other countries, the shift to looser restrictions has not resulted in a spike of new cases.
On the basis of this good news, Cabinet has decided we can now increase the size of all gatherings to 100 from 12 noon this Friday, 29 May. This means gatherings such as church services, weddings and funerals can now have 100 people present.
And that will be extended to hospitality venues who until now have only been taking bookings of 10 people or fewer. But people won't be able to hit the dance floor just yet.
At this stage, of course, we are still keeping the seating in those venues. And that is, of course, because with organised events like weddings and so on, much easier for us to keep a track of who's together. When you have a large number of strangers coming and going in those hospitality spaces, that becomes more difficult.
Jacinda Ardern says Cabinet will also be meeting on June 8th to decide if the country will move to level 1, and at the very latest, a decision will be made June 22. But she warns that despite the country and economy moving closer to normality, there will still be tough times ahead. That's why the government is introducing a new relief payment for those out of work due to COVID-19. The payment will be available for 12 weeks from June 8th for New Zealand citizens or residents who have lost their jobs since March 1st, while they look for new employment or retrain. Those who lost full-time work will get $490 a week, and former part-time workers will get $250. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says the scheme is similar to those introduced after the Canterbury earthquake and global financial crisis.
The fact that this is the third time that governments have needed to do something like this in the wake of a crisis is an indication that we need to look at a possible enduring solution when it comes to people who experience an immediate significant drop in income.
Grant Robertson says work is underway on a possible more permanent unemployment insurance scheme. Social Development Minister Carmel Cipollone says COVID-19 has brought about a new cohort of job seeker who will be under immense pressure to meet their living costs. She says in ordinary times, these people would find work relatively quickly or manage their costs without extra support. But these are not ordinary times.
They are New Zealanders facing job losses that may not qualify for a benefit. They may have high living costs in line with their previous earnings. And the labour market they are searching in will look different.
It's good news for Alana, who lost her job on the first day of lockdown, with her income going from $80,000 to zero overnight. She went to work in income for help, but she wasn't eligible for the benefit because her husband's income was too high. Alana says the $490 a week will help, but it comes too late for people like her who lost their jobs 2 months ago and have been struggling to pay the bills and the mortgage.
In the meantime, I'm out on the street. That's basically, and I'm not over-exaggerating, that's what it comes down to at this stage, when you can't even go and get milk or anything. It's very degrading and very demoralising.
National's newly appointed leader, Todd Muller, says while the party supports helping New Zealanders, the two-tiered system is a haphazard approach.
But our concern with that announcement, it's ill-defined because now and ill-directed, because now we have a scenario where if you were made unemployed in the last week of February, you get half the rate. If you're made unemployed from the 1st of March, it's $490.
Todd Muller says there needs to instead be a stronger focus to help businesses afloat. But when asked why someone who lost their job due to COVID-19 deserved more money than someone who lost their job for another reason, Ms Ardern says it's no different from the GFC or the Christchurch earthquakes.
This is the third time now that we've had to do something like this when there's been a large-scale shock to our system, and I think it's time we consider the longer-term framework.
From Parliament, Ko Charlie Drever, DNA.
And some of you have been getting in touch about the National Party, reshuffle of portfolios. This person says, Todd Muller said he had 55 amazing people to draw on, so his number 3 had to be drawn back from retirement to help. How do the others from 4 down to 55 feel? This person says. That's in respect to Amy Adams, who was going to retire from Parliament, appearing at number 3 on the list. Well, it's been a day of extraordinary movement in New Zealand journalism. First came news of significant job losses at MediaWorks today. Then it was revealed that Stuff, one of the country's largest media companies, will be bought by its chief executive for $1. Alicia Foon has the details.
A Monday morning all-staff meeting was how MediaWorks employees found out about a restructure, resulting in 130 job cuts in sales, radio and marketing. It comes as another devastating blow after staff were asked in April to take a 15% cut, as the company backed into a corner following the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. Media commentator Gavin Ellis says he wasn't surprised about the need for redundancies, but was shocked by the number.
Now it's quite plain that they're in a very, very difficult crisis. You don't make cuts of that size unless things are bad indeed. And my estimate was that it was probably of the order of 15 to 20% of the overall staff.
MediaWorks Chief Executive Michael Anderson would not comment, but in an email to staff said they were in a fight for survival, tackling the biggest crisis of their lifetime, and that pay cuts would extend through to the end of September. The company's TV arm, which has been on sale since October last year, was mostly spared and is still looking for a buyer.
If they don't find a buyer for the television arm, my fear is that these private equity owners will cut their losses and walk away. We simply cannot afford to lose that bigger segment of our media market. It's a really difficult time for them, a worrying time for the country, I think.
But elsewhere, Stuff will be moved into local ownership after Chief Executive Sinead Boucher purchased the company from its Australian owners Nine Entertainment for just $1. Nine will retain ownership of Stuff's Petone printing plant site and lease it back to the media company. Stuff will receive a percentage of the proceeds of its sales of Stuff fibre to Vocus. Stuff Chief Executive Sinead Boucher says it's a new era for the company, but there are no signed investors yet. She says she will be looking at a mix of staff ownership and other partnerships.
At the moment, it is just me, and being able to do that with Nine, just working over the last couple of weeks to secure that transfer of ownership. The next step now is to sit down and work out how to introduce a model that allows for some staff direct ownership and also leaves open, the ability for us to potentially bring in other investors or partners down the track.
Sinead Boucher says she has been overwhelmed by reaction today. She says she is excited and a little daunted at the prospect.
Well, I think it's a mixture of both. I am feeling really overwhelmed today by all the positive reaction I've had from staff and from readers and customers. But it's definitely a big undertaking and certainly not one that I, sort of planned out for my career when I started off at Aoraki School of Journalism in Timaru.
Stuff journalists reacted positively, saying it's the best possible outcome, though several say they were under no illusions about the financial challenges facing the business. Former Editor-in-Chief of New Zealand Herald, Tim Murphy, says although the country's largest newsroom will be feeling relief, they won't have dodged a bullet completely.
There will be regional titles, smaller titles of the Stuff empire that will close or will certainly downgrade again, and there will be jobs at risk because they're not making enough money in themselves. They're a cost to the overall business.
Meanwhile, Mr. Ellis says Stuff is in the safest hands under its own management.
Sinead Boucher has been the champion of Stuff's digital strategy. It will be interesting to see now that she has a free hand just where she takes Stuff in the digital direction. So far, she has endeavoured to keep the staff intact and has done a pretty good job on that, even to the point of taking a massive cut in her own salary, which speaks volumes for her commitment.
Both commentators say undeniably there are more challenges ahead for both organisations, and major government intervention is needed to rescue many struggling media companies. For Checkpoint, ko Alicia Foon tēnei.
Students across Australia return to school today for their first full week in more than 2 months. Parents are being urged to drive or walk their children to school to ease the pressure on public transport. The ABC's Barbara Miller filed this report.
Welcome back. We are excited to see you, reads the sign at the Sydney Inner City Primary School, Glebe Public. And the feeling's mutual.
I'm feeling great. I'm excited to talk to my friends.
What about homeschooling? What did you think of that?
Not so great.
Why was that?
It was rough. It was a rough time for me.
Who was your teacher there? Was it mum or dad?
I actually go to my mum and dad's house between, so both times were rough. They were good teachers, but I mean, like, I would get headaches time to time, and it would be rough to continue on.
Special arrangements are in place to try and curb the spread of coronavirus in schools. For the time being, no assemblies will be held, no intra-school sport. External visitors, such as music tutors, are still locked out. And here, on the whole, parents seem reassured.
She wanted to come to school, so yeah. And Glebe Public is doing well with the measures, so it's really good.
I have only one child. He's born at home. I want him to go to school.
It's better for him, you think?
Yeah, better for him and me. He need play with other child, with his friends. Yeah.
What reassures you? What gives you confidence that this is a good move to have the schools back?
Well, we have not heard anything, at least in Glebe, we have not heard anything about any cases over here. So, yeah, that gives us confidence that, he's good at school.
It's been a confusing time for parents in the state who were initially told it would only be by the end of this term, in early July, that most students would be back full-time. A phased return where students went back 1 day a week lasted just 2 weeks.
It was hard, but we got into schedule, once the weeks went on, and it was getting easy, and now they've thrown us another spanner in the works, so yeah.
Thrown you another spanner in the works?
Like as in, now stop doing the homeschooling, now just throwing everything, so now we have to get back to the old routine.
Some children are being kept away from school over health concerns, with a petition to give parents a choice, attracting more than 7,000 signatures. Premier Gladys Berejiklian.
That's a matter for them, but their children will be marked as absent. We're not changing our policy. I appreciate that a small percentage of parents make those choices, but all choices come with consequences, and that's a matter for them.
And the New South Wales Premier ending that report from the ABC's Barbara Miller. And just before we go, some of you getting in touch about, the portfolio handout today from National's new leader. Alan says, Mr Muller had no answer for you on Friday about a plan. Don't let Amy get away with platitudes. Have they not got a single, all capital letters, plan or measure? Thanks for getting in touch, Alan. And someone else has said, it's good to see a capable MP like Amy Adams staying on, but is National's blue dead wood hindering it? Appreciate all your feedback this evening. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget, you can go back and check particularly our video stories online. We'll put them on our Facebook page and on our website. The news team will keep you up to date overnight. And First Up, we'll be back with you first thing tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The maximum number of people allowed at gatherings will rise to 100 from Friday. Cabinet will decide whether to move to Alert Level 1 within 4 weeks. Drought-stricken farmers in North Waikato and Northland are to receive a government relief fund of $500,000. The Prime Minister has hit back at criticism. New payments for those out of work due to the COVID-19 creates a two-tiered benefit system. And New Zealanders may be able to travel to New South Wales and Victoria before Australians can move about freely in their own country. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7, then it's Nights with Brian Crump.
Coming up this week on Nights, Cultural Ambassador Raymond Sangapolitelli is on the line from Clendon, Manurewa. We continue the story of the Spitfire, the plane that forced the Nazis to abandon plans to invade Great Britain. And Nicola Gaston is at the intersection of science, fact and fiction with feminine